I didn't expect much that day. It was cloudy, the kind of day where even the sun doesn't want to show up. We gathered in the lawyer's office, my brother Thomas, his wife, and me. The smell of old books and cold coffee filled the air. I sat on the corner chair, the one no one else wanted. Like always, Thomas was relaxed. He leaned back, fingers tapping on the armrest like he already knew the ending to a story I hadn't even read yet. His wife, Cynthia, was dressed like she was attending a party, not our mother's final goodbye. And me, I just held my mother's rosary in my hand, the one she used to carry when she thought no one was watching. When the lawyer came in, he smiled politely, shuffling papers. Mrs. Langford left a detailed will, he said, like that was supposed to comfort me. He read out loud, slow and clear. To my beloved son, Thomas Langford, I leave the family house, the property, and all financial assets. Thomas didn't even look surprised. He just nodded slightly, as if it was obvious. And to my daughter, Claire Langford. He paused. My heart did that strange little jump, the one that's half hope, half dread. I leave this envelope, marked in her name. That was it. An envelope. I didn't move. Didn't speak. I just stared at it. Thomas smirked, not cruelly, but confidently. Like someone who had already won. The lawyer handed me the envelope, light as air. It barely weighed anything, but it felt like it might crush me anyway. On the way home, no one spoke. Thomas offered to drive me, but I refused. I walked. The wind was cold, sharp, almost whispering. My mother's neighborhood looked smaller now, like it too had forgotten me. When I got home, I made tea I didn't drink and opened the envelope. Inside was a single photograph. It was me and her, sitting on the back porch, taken just the day before she passed. She looked tired, but she was smiling at me, the kind of smile that meant something, even if she never said it. On the back of the photo, there was a note in her handwriting. I couldn't give you what he took from me. But I trust you'll know what to do with the truth. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't understand at first. What truth? Then I turned the photo over again, and I noticed, in the corner of the image, reflected in the window, Thomas's shadow. He was standing behind her that day, holding her phone. It wasn't just a photo. It was proof. Later that night, I called the lawyer. I asked if my mother had changed her will recently. He hesitated. Yes, he said. There was another draft, unsigned. She said she wanted to talk to Thomas before finalizing it. She never got the chance. The next morning, I took the photo and went to the police station. I didn't go there for revenge. I went because for the first time, I realized my mother had been afraid, and I hadn't seen it. Now, every time I walk past that house, I don't see the porch or the flowers she loved. I just see the window, and the reflection that changed everything. And maybe, after all these years, my mother finally left me something more valuable than any house or ring. She left me her silence, and the reason to break it. After the reading of my mother's will, the silence in that house never left me. Even when I walked out, the sound of that clock in the lawyer's office followed me home, tick, 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 like it was counting down to something I didn't understand yet. Thomas called me the next day. He didn't ask how I was. He just said, "We'll need to clean out the house by Sunday. The realtor wants to take photos." His voice was calm, professional, distant, like he was talking about some stranger's home, not the place where we grew up. I said, "It's too soon." He didn't respond. He just sighed and hung up. When I got to the house 2 days later, his car was already parked out front. Cynthia was inside, boxing up old dishes and silverware like they were leftovers. She smiled when she saw me, that tight, polite smile women give each other when they're pretending not to hate one another. "Claire," she said, "I didn't expect you so early." "I didn't expect you at all," I replied. She looked away, pretending to be busy. Thomas was in our mother's bedroom, sorting through papers. I noticed how careful he was, too careful, like someone looking for something specific. "Did she ever tell you about a safety deposit box?" he asked suddenly. The question hit me like cold air. I shook my head. "No." "Why?" He shrugged. "Just curious," but I saw the look in his eyes, that flicker of panic he couldn't hide. Later that night, as I sat in the living room surrounded by boxes, I heard the neighbors outside. Mrs. Green and the woman from 2 doors down. They were whispering, but loud enough for me to hear. "She says the daughter's back now." "The quiet one." "Oh, the one who never married?" "Yeah. The brother took everything, didn't he? That's what I heard. But you know, that family always had secrets. I wanted to open the door and scream. But I didn't. I just sat there, listening, letting their words crawl under my skin like tiny needles. That night, I dreamed of my mother again. She was sitting in her chair by the window, the same photo in her lap. She looked up and said only one thing: "Not everything that's written is true." I woke up shaking. The next morning, I went through her drawers again. And that's when I found it, a small, folded note taped under the drawer. It was dated 3 days before she died. It said, "If Thomas asks about the deposit box, don't trust him. There's more he doesn't want you to find." My hands went cold.
That afternoon, I drove to the bank. The clerk looked nervous when I gave my mother's name. "Yes, Mrs. Langford did have a box," she said. "But it's been accessed recently." I froze. By who? Her son. The same week she passed. I thanked her and walked out slowly, trying to breathe. When I got home, I found Thomas sitting on my porch. He looked tired, or maybe just cornered. "Claire," he said, "we need to stop digging. Let things go." "Why?" He didn't answer. He just looked at me, the way someone looks at a fire they can't control anymore. Then he said quietly, "Because some truths don't save anyone." He stood up and walked away. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even feel angry. Just a deep, familiar silence. But this time, it didn't scare me. It felt like preparation. Because if my mother was right, if the truth was still buried somewhere, I was going to find it. Even if it meant digging through everything she and Thomas tried so hard to keep hidden. After a while, life started pretending to be normal again. The town found new rumors, new scandals, new faces to whisper about. When people greeted me, the curiosity in their eyes was gone. Only silence remained, the same silence my mother left behind. When Thomas was arrested, I didn't feel anything. Not relief, not hate, not even satisfaction. It was like watching the final scene of a movie I was never part of. The last time I saw his face was in court. He looked tired, defeated, but he never looked at me. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe I was his mirror, and he couldn't stand what he saw. The trial didn't last long. The evidence was clear. The videos before my mother's death, the arguments, the unsigned will. Everything fit together like a puzzle that had always been there, waiting. But for me, nothing was ever that clear. Because knowing the truth and living with it are two very different things. People told me, "You're free now." But freedom is so quiet, it can drown you. I stayed in that house. Her chair, her old radio, the half-finished knitting all still there. As if she was still around, just waiting in another room.
One night, I turned on the radio. It still played the same station. An old song came on. One of her favorites. For a second, I could almost hear her voice singing along. Soft, calm, a little sad. That's when I realized how long it had been since I'd spoken inside the silence. A few days later, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, but the handwriting was familiar. It was from Thomas. He had written from prison. "Claire, I don't know what really happened with Mom. We argued that day, yes, but I never meant to hurt her. Maybe her heart just couldn't take it. Maybe I made her that way. But you did the right thing. Maybe you'll never forgive me, but believe me, I haven't forgiven myself." My hands were shaking as I read it. I wanted to be angry, but there was only emptiness. The day I lost my mother, I realized the idea of family had already died long before. Everything after that was just a slow collapse. Years went by. People forgot. New houses were built. New families moved in. But I stayed. I cleaned the yard, painted the walls, fixed the kitchen. Nothing changed the smell. Tea, soap, and a trace of grief. Sometimes at night, when the wind hit the window, I thought I could hear her voice. Like she was whispering, "That's enough now." But is it ever really enough? A mother's silence, a brother's betrayal. They dig too deep. Even breathing can feel like remembering. One morning I picked up the photo again. The note was still there. I trust you'll know what to do with the truth. And I finally did. I wasn't going to hide it. I was going to tell it, so that someone else wouldn't stay silent. I went to the local newspaper, asked to share my story. They didn't print it. "It's too heavy," they said. "People don't want to read things like that." I smiled and left. They didn't need to understand. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it because something inside me had ended, and something else had begun. That evening, I stood in the garden as the sun went down. The wind moved through the flowers. I looked at the soil. The roses my mother planted were still alive. Their roots were deep, unseen, but strong. Just like her truth. I'm not afraid anymore. Not of silence, not of remembering, not of being alone. Because I learned something. Sometimes the only inheritance worth having is the courage to speak. And that's what my mother really left me. Not her silence, her voice. Years passed. When I look out that old window now, I see someone else. I'm not that frightened woman anymore, but I still know her. The one who carried her mother's silence, the one afraid of her own voice. She still lives somewhere inside me. The town hasn't really changed. People still love to whisper about someone else's pain. But now, there's no one left to tell my story. Except me. If I don't, it'll fade away like everything else. One morning, there was another letter in my mailbox. No name, no return address. Inside was a small rusted key, and a note that said, "There's one more thing your mother left for you." My chest tightened. There was an address, an old storage unit outside town, long abandoned. The next day, I went there. Standing in front of the door, even the silence inside me felt like it stopped breathing. I turned the key. The door groaned open. The air smelled like dust, mold, and time. Old shelves, a few boxes, and in the corner, my mother's faded blanket. On the table sat a small box with my name on it. Claire. Inside there was a single cassette tape and a note. "If you're listening to this, it means you're not afraid anymore." I took it home. It took me hours to find her old cassette player. When I finally pressed play, the room filled with static. And then her voice. Weak but clear. "Claire, maybe this will surprise you, but protecting something doesn't always mean hiding it. I loved Thomas. I loved you too. But I made mistakes. By staying silent, I taught you to be silent too. I had no right to do that. If you're hearing this, please forgive me. And speak, because I didn't. When the tape ended, I couldn't move for a long time. Tears came, but not from pain, from release. It felt like something inside me finally loosened. Even after all these years, my mother's voice still knew how to guide me home. The next morning, I took the cassette and went to her grave. I placed it gently on the soil. "I've spoken for every silence you left," I said. "And now, we're both free." The wind blew through the trees, rustling the leaves. The sky was clear. And for the first time, truly, I felt free.